So this is a review of the 49ers second half of the season, 2022. And we left off after week 8. Went through the first 8 games. And wow, I'll just say this has been the most memorable regular season I can remember. 2019 was a lot of fun. 2011 also was the first season with Harbaugh. 19 was the first successful year with Shanahan, and it ended with a Super Bowl loss. This season, though, wow, the second half, there's a lot to say with weeks 10 through 18, and since there was no perfect place to pick up, we got as good as we could get with the bye week. We went through the first 8 games, and it left off with the Rams victory in Los Angeles, dominant win, 31-14. It was the Christian McCaffrey come out game. They just took over in the second half. So they had the bye week. In week 10, it was a Sunday night game against the Chargers. And the Chargers came into this one with a lot of injuries. This was a game the 49ers should have won. But they didn't play particularly well in the first half. It wasn't until the second half that they won the game. And even at that, it was a little too close for comfort. It was a 22-16 win. The offense wasn't really clicking that much. The defense did enough, but it wasn't exactly their best all-around game. But it was a win. It was a win, and I have to remind us again, at the bye week, they were 4-4. And entering week 7 was when they acquired Christian McCaffrey. I'd say standout, Nick Bosa had an excellent game. He had a sack and 3 tackles for loss. And they moved to 5-4. Then, what kind of annoys me about the schedule makers is, if you asked me what do you prefer for your average week, well, for your average everyday week, I still enjoy the Sunday afternoon games the most. But then they give you 2 primetime games back to back. I mean, primetime games, who doesn't like them? You like to have something special. It's like a vacation, a change from the normal routine. But when they give you a Sunday night game and they come back the next week with a Monday night game in Mexico, sometimes it's a little too much. Too much for me. They go up against the Cardinals, and it's Colt McCoy at quarterback, and this was a home game for the 49ers. And it was a game that had some rain. Really wasn't much of a factor in it. Well played game. 38-10. Garoppolo, this was one of his better games. Give it up to Jimmy Garoppolo. George Kittle, it was nice to see him get involved. All around, very impressive game. No drama. Dominant win. So they go to 6-4. Then they come home and they face the Saints. Very tough defensive game, an ugly game. Not a lot of highlight plays, but they shut the Saints out 13-0. Andy Dalton was starting, and this was a pleasing game for the eyes visually because the Saints actually wore the classic road uniform, the white jersey, gold pants. And the Saints played really hard. I was impressed. Their defense really shut down the 49ers run game, and they played very physical. 49ers just have the better team. And the game was put away with a Nick Bosa sack. Fred Warner also forced a fumble on Kamara. They did enough to win, but not pretty. Now this game, week 13, was one of those ones you circle on the calendar. Not the start of the season so much, but as the season went on, because at that point the Dolphins were an excellent football team. They looked like not just one of the best teams in the AFC, but one of the best teams in football. A legitimate Super Bowl team. And this was the game where Mike McDaniel would come back to face Kyle Shanahan. And what happens on the very first play? A 75-yard touchdown. Quick slant. The Tua connects with the former 49er Sherfield. And you're saying, whoa, we may be in a lot of trouble, because they are a fast, explosive, fast-scoring offense. And then you have to think about Tyreek Hill and Waddle. But that was not the big story of the game. The big story of the game was the Jimmy Garoppolo injury. Already lost Trey Lance in week 2. Then they lost Jimmy Garoppolo. And then you see Brock Purdy come on the field. And at that point, I already felt like it was a lost season, because I did not want to sit through another Garoppolo season. I just can't take another Garoppolo season. But you figure, well, if Garoppolo's in there because of the Lance injury, well, it's a good situation. They're not going to go to the Super Bowl. They're not going to win a Super Bowl. They're probably not going to go to it. But they still have a good chance of making it to the playoffs. When Garoppolo went down, I said to myself, season over. That's it. They're not even going to make it the playoffs. And appearances are deceiving. Brock Purdy, he's the last pick in the draft. The very last pick in the 7th round. You look at his physical tools, average arm at best, undersized. But he led the 49ers to a win. And this was a game that they won the second half. They were down at halftime. It was just, saying to myself, they're not going to be able to keep up. And I wouldn't think they'd be able to keep up with Garoppolo, but with Purdy, as he made plays. And this quarterback, the last pick in the draft, would be the story of the rest of the regular season. 49ers win 33-17. Defense and offense, good all around second half. And you know what was always frustrating about Garoppolo was that he couldn't really put more than a few good weeks, consecutive weeks. A lot of times it'd be, could we just get 2 good weeks in a row out of Garoppolo? It often felt like you couldn't get a complete game, really. And just look back at the playoff games, whether it's the 19 with the Vikings or the Packers and the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, or last year, Dallas. It started off well. Well, I know he got hurt in the second half, but it was ugly. Green Bay was a struggle. The Rams, we know how that ended. But it was a very impressive second half. Nick Bosa was terrorizing Tua. He had multiple sacks, and he once again ended the game with a forced fumble that Greenlaw ran back for a touchdown. So 8-4. So they went from being 3-4 to 8-4. And now with Garoppolo being out for the rest of the season and Trey Lance being out for the rest of the season, this was Brock Purdy's team. And his first career start would be against Tom Brady at home. 49ers Buccaneers. And you look on paper and you say, well, the 49ers should just blow them out. And the Buccaneers weren't playing well. And the Buccaneers didn't play well all season. And that's exactly what they did. The 49ers won 35-7, complete victory, and Brock Purdy continued to impress as he made plays with his arm. And let me just give you my thoughts about Purdy, and none of this is original at this point now that the regular season's over, but what does Purdy give you that Garoppolo does not? Or let's even start with Trey Lance. Was experience. That's one thing. I mean, if you looked at the two of these guys right next to each other, you'd say, again, the taller player is Lance, the more athletic player is Lance, the better arm is Lance, but Purdy's a real quarterback. He has experience. And he knows what he's doing out there. He's not raw. And then you compare him to Garoppolo. Would I say Garoppolo has a slightly better arm? Yes, even though Garoppolo, I would put him at an average NFL arm. But Purdy, more mobile. He sees the field better. He goes through his progressions faster and more consistently can make bigger plays. And this was a big game for Brock Purdy, and he outplayed Tom Brady. He beat Tom Brady. And there were a few plays that ended up going the 49ers' way, a penalty here or there that could have changed at least the feel of the game. They weren't going to lose this game. The 49ers defeat Tampa Bay, and this was over at halftime. 35-7. Now they're 9-4. And Purdy played just about the whole game against the Dolphins, but you're looking at this guy and you're saying, yeah, at the combine, he'd fail at the combine. He wouldn't impress anybody. But he has the intangibles, he has the leadership, he's accurate, and he doesn't make the big mistake. That's been the theme of the second half. I mean, it's not to say he hasn't made, sure, he's made some mistakes. He's had a few rookie moments. But just command of the offense, the respect of his teammates, maturity, everything you could want from a young quarterback. And you look at Trey Lance, whether he's raw, you look at someone like Zach Wilson, his second year, his team doesn't care for him at all. And quite frankly, they don't want to play with him. Purdy is the opposite of a Zach Wilson. But how about this for a lineup, though? You have, and I'll get back to the Dolphins game for a moment, that it was a special game for Shanahan because at the start of the season when the 49ers got off to a rough start, a lot of people were saying, oh, Mike McDaniel was really the genius with the Dolphins because the Dolphins got off to such a fast start. Well, he won that game, and that was a big moment for him personally. And then fast forwarding here, he comes in and Purdy in that Dolphins game, and he takes over for Garoppolo and was able to help lead them. It was a team win, but help lead them to a win in a difficult situation. At home, yes. But then you have your first career start against Tom Brady, the greatest of all time, and then your first road game is a primetime game in Seattle. And you can say whatever you want about the Seahawks. Playing in Seattle is I'm not going to say it's the best all-around stadium or the best experience in football, but when you're just talking about crowd noise and environment, there's nothing that's better than it for an outdoor stadium. It is just a crazy place to play, and it's the loudest outdoor stadium in football. The way it's built and designed, what they have is up there is great, and getting them outdoors was one of the best things that ever happened to the Seahawks, as far as I'm concerned. And I like the Kingdome, but getting them into that new stadium and allowing them to play out in the elements and still have incredible volume and crowd noise, we really gained something when the Seahawks moved to the NFC and have this stadium. So that's what he was dealing with in his first road game. So first start against Tom Brady, first road game in Seattle, arguably the toughest road stadium to play in, and prime time on top of it. And the Seahawks weren't playing well. They got off to a good start, but if the 49ers would win, they would win the division. And the final score was 21-13, but the game really wasn't that close. They had an interception that got wiped away. The game should have been 28-6, or maybe 28-9. The 49ers win the division. You know, Purdy was playing hurt. He had a oblique injury. He did enough, and just doing all the little things right. And big game from George Kittle. It was nice to see. One of the best things that happened with Purdy coming in was the 49ers using George Kittle again. I am screaming, during the games most of the time, saying, you have George Kittle and you don't use him. Talk about dynamic. I'm not saying he's a receiver. He's as good of a receiver as Travis Kelce, but he's not far behind. I think after the catch, he's as good as it gets. He doesn't have the hands of Kelce. He doesn't have the route running of Kelce. But when you consider the full package in his blocking and then his yards after the catch, they don't use him like they should. And Kittle just broke out here in the second half with double-digit touchdowns, career high for the season. And it's just like, finally you're using him again. It's George Kittle, for Pete's sake. And the 49ers, of course, would wear the white on white because they've worn white on white for 4 straight years, 19, 20, 21, 22, 4 straight years. And they win in Seattle. They sweep them. And the Seahawks were wearing those neon tops. And what a game for the defense. I mean, Nick Bosa was Nick Bosa. Dre Greenlaw with a big forced fumble. Hufanga was a presence. Ward really limiting DK Metcalf. I mean, what a defensive game. So they win the division and they're 10-4. So again, 3-4 to 10-4. Then week 16, Saturday game, Christmas Eve, you have the Washington Commanders. First time the 49ers playing the Washington Commanders. And the Commanders gave them a good game, especially early. Very good defensive game, well coached. But as the game went on, the better team would prevail. The 49ers would win 37-20. Not the best offensive game, but the defense, again, was excellent. Nick Bosa was terrorizing whoever was quarterback, whether it was Heineke. They eventually brought Wentz in. He got credit for 2 sacks, but he also got a sack on a 2-point conversion, so he should have got credited for 3 sacks. So 11-4 for the 49ers. And the last 2 games of the regular season. January 1st, New Year's, in Las Vegas against the Raiders. And I'm going to keep saying it. I know the NFL loves having a team in Las Vegas. I wish the Raiders were still here in Oakland. That's where they should be. That's where they began. I know they won 2 Super Bowls in Los Angeles, but you couldn't even keep them in the state of California? Come on. I felt of the 2 teams that should be, the 2 teams that were in Los Angeles, that left Los Angeles, the team that should be in Los Angeles, if they were going to move, is the Raiders, not the Rams. I mean, the Rams have already fallen off the map, even winning a Super Bowl. I mean, let me go back to week 1, Bills-Rams, the Sunday night opener. How many Bills fans were there? I mean, it's a sad fan base. I mean, they couldn't even prevent their stadium from being overtaken after winning a Super Bowl week 1 kickoff at home. But let's get into the game. Now, the 49ers were on some run. And this was the game where they'd face adversity. And the way it was going, I thought the 49ers were going to lose. Stidham, besides Patrick Mahomes, no one had more success than him. And the Raiders were moving the ball. And as I was watching this game, you knew the Raiders were underperforming all year, but you just look at the talent all over the field for the Raiders. Josh Jacobs, Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, Max Crosby. They have their problems, but there's a lot of talent. They should be a wild card team. It was a back and forth game, and the question many had brought up was, well, if things aren't just smooth sailing, how is Brock Purdy going to do? And this was not his finest game, but he responded, and he went back and forth with the Raiders, and he moved the football down the field. Very strong game for Christian McCaffrey. So you just had 2 great running backs. You have, in this one, 2 of the best pass rushers in football. I mean, arguably you could say the 2 best pass rushers in football are Bosa and Crosby. Neither of them had sacks, but there was just a lot of talent. But this was a really rough game for the 49ers defense. They just seemed off, and I don't think they did take the Raiders very seriously coming into this, and it showed. But they got a win. And you know what? The environment here was great because there were so many 49er fans there. It was almost a home game for the 49ers. But there was a lot of back and forth, too, between the 49er fans and the Raider fans. And it had to be the loudest game played there in Las Vegas to date. And it's just great for football. 49ers win in overtime, and that is 9 in a row, 12-4. And that sets up the final game at home against the Cardinals. And the Cardinals come out and score right away on a trick play. But after that trick play, 49ers defeated them soundly 38-13. I mean, Blau was starting for the Cardinals. The offense sputtered a little early, but they got it going, and the defense, besides giving up that touchdown really on a trick play, they did the job. The 49ers made it 10 in a row to end the season. Don't need to break this game down too much in detail. The Cardinals are a mess. They already fired Cliff Kingsbury. They're going to be without Kyler Murray for probably half the season next year. And I don't know what to make of Kyler Murray. I was a big fan of his when he was a rookie, and he's just regressed. You could say the league's figured him out some. I just think about that playoff game last year. Wow, how bad he looked in that, and he's just gone down ever since that impressive rookie season. And now they're talking about trading DeAndre Hopkins. They haven't done well drafting. If there was anything to feel good about it, this was J.J. Watt's last game, and he was great. What a way to go out. He had 2 sacks. He had 3 tackles for loss. Clearly, he has some left in the tank. And what can you say about his career? He is one of the greatest defensive players of all time. And it was nice to see a guy go out not hobbling on one leg and still being an impactful player. I mean, this was the best season he had in years. I mean, he should have been a Pro Bowler this year. He was among the league leaders in tackles for losses. At his peak, we're talking about, let's just say, 4 or 5 year period. He won 3 Defensive Player of the Years. I'm not sure, and you would not be wrong if you said for that 4 or 5 year period before he had all the injuries, that he, for that period, was the greatest defensive player we've ever seen. I mean, you look at the stats, the sacks, the tackle for losses, the quarterback hits. I mean, no one even comes close since some of those statistics have been recorded. You're talking about quarterback hits. I mean, he was up in the low 50s for a season. Tackles for losses. I mean, there's no one that even comes close to this since they've been measuring it. I mean, I'd say the 2 greatest defensive players that I've seen are Watt and Aaron Donald. I mean, we always saw the end of Reggie White with the Packers and even the Panthers. But I'd say for that 5 year period, you could put him against anybody, and you could make an argument just for those 5 years better than any defensive player in the history of the game. I mean, where he stacks up all time, that's another discussion for another day. And it's always the debate about short excellence compared to longevity. Without question, I can't believe some people were even saying, oh, well, he will probably be Hall of Famer. I mean, 3 Defensive Player of the Years? That's only been done by who? Lawrence Taylor. He was the second player to ever do it. After Lawrence Taylor, and yes, Aaron Donald's done it after Watt, and I'd say sure head-to-head, if you just compared those 2 careers, I'd probably take Donald, but again, at the very peak of his powers, if you want to say that, the best. He could play inside, outside, 290-pound man, the way he moved, and he just lived in the backfield. What a career. Four hours, 110 in a row, and Brock Purdy, he is the best. He had the best stretch of football for a 49ers quarterback since Jeff Garcia. Better than Kaepernick, better than Alex Smith, better than Jimmy Garoppolo. And yes, it's still a small sample size. Yeah, but he did play in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 7 games. For the most part, almost played 7 full games. And we're all impressed. And, the 49ers are the second seed. They're able to jump over the Vikings. And can they go all the way with a rookie quarterback? Well, normally you'd say it's out of the question. But now, after what we've seen him do in all these different scenarios and situations, it's a possibility. I'm not necessarily counting on it, but if you asked me, oh, well, who would you rather take your chances with in the playoffs on a playoff run? Garoppolo or Purdy? I'll take Purdy. Wouldn't even give it any thought right away. Give me Purdy. And the 49ers are the number 2 seed. They've won 10 in a row. They're the hottest team in football. They have the best roster in the NFL. Period. The best roster top to bottom, NFC, AFC. You're considering the star power. And I wasn't for Christian McCaffrey getting traded, but wow, getting to see him week in and week out. And yeah, he's surrounded by great players. The guy's an excellent running back. Fast and more powerful than you'd think. I mean, he's totally chiseled. I mean, you see his biceps and his legs. And this guy is just sheer muscle. Not the biggest guy, but he's in incredible shape. He stayed healthy. If they win the Super Bowl, the trade was worth it. If they fall short and they don't eventually get a Super Bowl this year, next year out of it, they gave up a lot for him. But right now, it looks great. And then I didn't even talk about him as a receiver. I mean, he is arguably the greatest receiving running back of all time. I mean, I have to fire up the Marshall Faulk highlights again, but the outstretched catches he has, just the degree of difficulty he makes a lot of plays most receivers can't even make. His route running, his hands, yards after the catch, I mean, his just acceleration. You're saying white guys can't run? Well, for the most part, it's true. There's a few exceptions. I can run. I mean, I can really run. I can outrun almost anyone who's not a professional athlete in just a sprint. There's not many of us, so that can run. Caffrey, to go along with the rest of the offense and the weapons. I mean, the good news is they've gotten healthy at the right time. I mean, sure, there's a few injuries, but Deebo Samuel went down. I didn't mention about the Deebo Samuel injury. It looked like he was going to be done for the season, or maybe he tore an ACL. The good news is they're getting all the guys back. You have McCaffrey and you have Elijah Mitchell. And now that you've brought Jordan Mason around as a power back, so you have 2 explosive running backs, just electric running backs, maybe a better way of saying it. Now you're using George Kittle like you're supposed to. Brandon Ayuk is a legit number 1 receiver. Deebo Samuel's back. Please don't use him as a running back. Use him as a receiver. Use him on screens. Fine. Juwan Jennings is a nice number 3. Overall, the offensive lines played well. And you have a young quarterback who, in my opinion, is giving you a better shot to go the distance than Garoppolo. Defense. Nick Bosa is the defensive player of the year. I remember reviewing the first half and saying, well, Bosa was very good, but I felt like he wasn't quite as good as he was last year. Well, the second half, he stepped it up. And he put his mark on a lot of games. I mean, let's look back at the whole schedule in the second half. I mean, he won or put games away. The Saints game, he had the sack at the end of the game. The Dolphins game, 3-sack game, forced fumble at the end of the game. You had also very dominant in the Chargers game I mentioned. The Commanders game completely overwhelmed their offensive line and the quarterbacks. And then the Raiders game, where he didn't have any sacks. He didn't even record a tackle in the game. He had 5 quarterback hits, and he had the play that ended the game where he pushed the lineman straight into Stidham, and it knocked his arm. He knocked his own lineman into him, and his hand or his arm hit his offensive lineman's helmet. The ball flew up in the air. Interception that set up the game-winning field goal. He won that game. So I can point to about 4 games that he was the best player without a doubt, or he ended the game essentially on a big play. And that's the thing with Bosa. I mean, he was a star. He was one of the best defensive players in football the moment he stepped on the field. I was down like so many fans that we missed a whole season of Bosa because of his injury in 2020. But to see him come back last year as good as he was, and then this year, even better. And then on top of it, he leads the NFL in sacks, 18.5. He put up, I believe, the most quarterback hits since, again, the stat has been recorded outside of J.J. Watt. I think J.J. Watt is the only player that has more quarterback hits in a regular season than Bosa a few times. I think he did it twice, but almost 50 quarterback hits. I think it was 48 was what he got credited for. And there wasn't really anyone close. I think Crosby was the second most with 35. And he missed a game and a half, too. So he really only played 15.5 games and led the NFL in sacks. I don't want to hear about Micah Parsons. I mean, Micah Parsons is insane. He's just an athlete of athletes. But he slowed down in the second half. I mean, he was great in the first half of the season. I mean, his effectiveness just plummeted in the second half of the season. I mean, I love watching him play as much as the next guy. Amazing, but his impact wasn't even close to Bosa. Bosa was just consistent. He was very good in the first half, but in the second half of the season, no one even came close to being as good as him, and just the week in, week out effect he had on games. I mean, it's just a matter if he stays healthy. He's going to the Hall of Fame. And he's even better than his brother Joey Bosa, who's carved out a nice career for himself. But you just look at the numbers season by season, and Joey Bosa doesn't have a season that comes close to these last 2 that Nick's had. He came in the league younger. He didn't lose a whole season like Nick did, even though he lost almost this whole season. I think he only played in 3 games. The only thing he's better at is maybe forcing fumbles. And the rest of the defensive line is good, but there's no star anywhere else. But you've got solid guys, and you've got such a deep rotation, and it's good having Eric Armstead back. Talking about the linebackers, Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw talk about complementing each other. Fred Warner really came back to close to his 2020 form, where he's as good as any cover linebacker in the game. He's sideline to sideline, sure tackler, a better pass rusher than a lot of people think. He's just not asked to do it very much. He is a complete modern linebacker. He just doesn't miss any games. He hasn't missed a game since he's been in the league for 5 years. And then you have Greenlaw, who is more of a compact, slightly smaller, but he is so fast. He is so physical. He plays more in the box, but he can play in coverage too. It's not that he can't. He can play in coverage, Greenlaw. But he's faster than Warner. And Warner, again, sideline, sideline. He's faster and he's more vicious. He really delivers the big blows. I'd like to see him actually be used a little bit more as a pass rusher. I mean, not that you need it so much, but it would be interesting if they did. I mean, the only complaint about Greenlaw is his health. Can he stay on the field when he is? I mean, you could make the argument he's even better than Warner, even though their roles are different. I mean, he's more the physical enforcer, and he's just leveling running backs. And I mean, there was this play in the game against the Dolphins where he just cut Tyreek Hill off. It was incredible. I mean, this guy's a linebacker. He didn't give up any space to Tyreek Hill. He's so fast. I mean, he's got to be among the very fastest linebackers in the league. In the secondary, Ward is so good. What he's done as the number one corner, he really only had one bad game against the Chiefs, and that was it. Otherwise, he's just been superb. Hufanga, not quite as good of a first half as he had, or second half as he had in the first half, but he's far better than I could have ever expected. And you know who else needs to be brought up? Gibson. He led the team in interceptions. I mean, what a pickup he was. I'm not saying he's the greatest in the world in coverage, but he has a nose for the ball. Special teams was good. So I'd say if you're giving out grades, Purdy, I'm not going to give him a grade, but for 7 games, not even 7 complete games, McCaffrey, you can't give him anything short of an A. I mean, I don't know how this guy's not going to be an all-pro. He should be an all-pro, whether he didn't get the Pro Bowl or not. But McCaffrey, A, Ayuk, B+. Deebo Samuel, it wasn't even close to the season he had last year, and I really like to see them move away from him from being the running back role. I think he really did get beat up, and it did take a toll. And I wonder if it even it's affecting and slowed him down this year. But you don't need to when you got McCaffrey and Mitchell and Mason. That's the 3 M's, triple M right there. McCaffrey, Mitchell, Mason. And I love all three with what they bring. George Kittle, Kittle will B+, especially with the second half of the season. A couple of these defensive players like Nick Bosa, A+. Fred Warner, maybe an A-. Greenlaw, I'd probably give him an A-. I'd give him an A if he just played in more games. Ward, I'd give him, or he likes to go by Mooney Ward. I'd give him a solid A, and Hufanga, I'd give him a B+. And the only real weakness you have for this team is the second corner. Otherwise, the offensive line is very good. Aaron Banks, everyone talked about last year and coming this year. Oh, this guy is not going to do anything, and he doesn't fit the team, and he didn't even play really as a rookie at all. And is he playing next to Trent Williams? Yeah. But he was, if you don't hear your name called, like a lot of jobs, you're doing well. You're doing really well. And, this was Shanahan's best coaching. And he has an extremely talented team, yes, but he's fit all the pieces together. And I give him credit for going for it this year. And John Lynch gave him a lot of credit. And I've not been a great fan of Kyle Shanahan. I remember saying at the start of the year, well, I want to, And it sounds silly now, but I'd say don't let D'Amico Ryans go. I'd rather have him coach than Shanahan. But you know what? The whole thing about Shanahan, we've been saying it for years, is I don't think we've ever seen him do what he wanted to do because the limitations of Garoppolo and Garoppolo getting hurt. We're finally seeing what Shanahan can do with his quarterback, and the closest thing to his ideal quarterback is Brock Purdy. And he has been more aggressive. And just look at the scores of the games. I mean, 30s, consistently in the 30s with Brock Purdy. It's not the ugly, ugly games and just avoid the big mistake with Garoppolo. I mean, is he a conservative coach? All the way. Yeah, he's a conservative coach, but he's certainly been more aggressive and willing to open it up with Purdy more than he ever did with Garoppolo. So going into the playoffs, I'm not going to talk too much about the playoffs, but we'll get into that in the preview. 49ers Seahawks coming up. Boy, they on paper again are the best team. Can they do it? They can do it. It's not going to be easy because you're probably going to still have to face Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. I think they match it very well against the Bengals. I think the one guy they just don't want to see is Patrick Mahomes. He just has their number. I mean, you could say that about every team, but it hasn't gone well in 2 games against Patrick Mahomes. I think they're better equipped, and after seeing them again earlier in the season, I think they would be in a better place to face the Chiefs. I'm not really scared of anyone in the NFC. The Buccaneers, they blew the doors off the Buccaneers. They dominated the Seahawks twice. The Cowboys, if they had to play them, they're just so much deeper, and Dak Prescott makes too many mistakes. And their defense was good in the first half. It really fell off in the second half. The Vikings, who's scared of the Vikings? Nobody. The Eagles are the only team you're looking at because you'd have to go in Philadelphia, and I think they do present a problem with their 2 receivers. But Jalen Hurts, how healthy is he? And he has no experience in the playoffs himself. And the pressure is on the Eagles. Make no mistake, the pressure in the NFC is on the Eagles. Well, we'll get into the individual matchups in the preview, but it was a great ride this regular season. Whatever happens in the playoffs, I think nothing less than the championship game is a disappointment. And they have a great chance of getting the Super Bowl, and they have a good chance of winning the Super Bowl. Well, that's what I say. You got to, with this team, you got to at least make it to the conference championship game. At the start of the season, I was predicting they would lose in the divisional round, whether it be Lance or Garoppolo. But the way Purdy's playing, and as long as they can stay healthy and avoid, shooting themselves in the foot. I mean, that's so much of it is don't hurt yourselves. But I say that this is the best 49ers defense I've seen. Better than the Harbaugh seasons, better than the 19 team. I didn't get to see the 94 season. I don't know how you can't make the argument and make the case that this is the best all-around team since the 94 Super Bowl team. So let's let the playoffs begin and get into these games.